Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 348 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. Are you letting your colonies starve as you take off the spring honey crop? Now's the time to check. Also, drone-laying queens and egg-laying workers feature in this week's chat. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. This week's podcast is brought to you, in part, by High Five Multi-Guard. So,
when you need a little peace of mind that your bees are safe from dangers of all kind, pesticides, hornets, wasps and mice are no match for High Five. The High Five Multi-Guard is the best one in town. Keeps your bees safe all year round. The ultimate solution has been found. It's High Five.
The High Five Multi-Guard fits nearly all beehives and makes beekeeping much easier. High Five.
You've just got to love that jingle. Well done, Nat. I think it's a fantastic jingle, and I wish you well with the multi-guard. There'll be a link in the podcast notes if you want to go and take a look at it. Do support local businesses wherever possible, and High Five is a UK-based business producing their entrances in the UK, so take a look at it. Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast and another busy week of beekeeping. The weather has been a little changeable for us this week. Here in Norfolk, no significant rain as yet. Tomorrow may bring some. I'm talking to you on a Friday morning, so I think Saturday this week we should get some rain. By the time you hear this podcast, we'll know. And right now, really, I guess we could do with a couple of days of continuous rain, just to help the remaining spring flowering plants drop just a little more nectar, please, before our spring flow finally dries up and maybe there'll be a June gap. I don't think there will be one. I don't think we'll experience a June gap this year. Certainly, again, not here for me in Norfolk. Certainly not judging by the brambles that are looking likely to flower in the next week, particularly over at the fishing lakes. I mean, pretty much every track or path is flanked by brambles, and the flower buds have been swelling considerably over the last week and now look set to burst open. The June gap is an interesting and sometimes worrying phenomenon. If, as a beekeeper, you're not aware of it and you get a little greedy with the spring honey crop, it is possible to put your honeybee colonies at risk if and when it happens. The June gap is the short-lived period between the spring flowering plants finally going over, and the flowers, having done their job, fade and the nectar dries up, pollination having happened and the seeds or fruit being set, and the start of the summer nectar flow, where, as I've mentioned, it begins for me locally with the brambles coming into flower and once more providing our colonies with nectar and pollen. If you take all of your supers off the hive and have a vigorous laying queen, it is possible that your brood box, particularly the smaller ones, such as the Smith or Standard National brood boxes, could be left with no food and all brood, wall-to-wall brood, and nothing being saved in that brood box that they can eat. What tends to happen is the brood frames get full of brood and the colony expands rapidly to the point that the queen is forced to the very outside frames to lay her eggs, and the nectar and pollen gets placed in the next nearest spot, that being the bottommost super. You should easily spot this, as the bottom super will likely contain quite a lot of pollen, there being no space for it in the brood box. Of course, it's a simple job to spot that there's no food in the brood box on your next inspection, but only if you're looking for it. Far too often, though, we all get a little caught up in something else that distracts us and simply miss the fact that there is no food in there for them, and I include myself in that suggestion. I spoke about a situation I found one of our colonies in during the last Coaching Plus monthly Zoom session this month. If you're keen to get the very latest updates from my beekeeping year and chat about jobs around the apiary for the month, then it's a great way to spend a couple of hours each month. You can sign up via the Patreon tier selection. The colony in question was a very large expanding colony and was on the edge of a field of oilseed rape. It had probably been the hardest working colony and produced a large number of supers full of honey. It was back when we used some national and commercial brood boxes. Not something I have to worry about so much these days, having only the Langstroth hives for our honey production colonies. Anyway, the oilseed rape crop was coming to an end, and it was time to remove the honey crop and get it back to the honey room for extraction. This was back in the days of having the honey room at the back end of my garage, a snug 3 metres square room filled with extraction equipment and barely enough room to turn around on one spot. How things have moved on. Anyway, the delight of seeing so much honey distracted me from noticing that the brood box was full of brood and no food. We added clearer boards to the hive and the next day returned to collect the honey. As usual, I had a spare super beneath the clearer board to provide the bees with some additional space, and, having given the bees time, the supers were perfectly clear of bees. A quick trip out and back, and I was in the honey room extracting the spring crop. My usual routine is to extract the honey and then return the supers back to the hive as quickly as possible, usually the next day. They go back on the hive that they came from, so they can either clean them of any remaining honey if it's late in the season, or start to refill them, as was the case for this post-spring crop of honey. This occasion was no different, and I headed back out to replace the supers beneath the clearer board. What I saw when I returned was nothing short of a disaster waiting to happen, and I suspect if I'd waited another day to return the supers to the colony, they would have been dead. The first thing I noticed was that the bees on the outside of the hive were very slow to move around. Normally, at this time of the year, it's warming up early and the bees are busying themselves out and about foraging, but not on this occasion with this hive. And to be honest, there were a few dead bees, more than normal, on the floor outside the hive, a worrying development. Like so many other beekeepers, I'm sure, I immediately looked to someone else to blame. Had the farmer been out and sprayed his crops without telling me? Not sure. I opened the hive and immediately saw, literally, thousands of bees, zombie-like, crawling around slowly and not looking very well at all. Now at this point, if you happen to see something similar, the best thing to do is pause. Clear your mind, don't panic, and have a long think about what has happened with the hive in the last 24 to 48 hours. Think about what you might have done, and actually the penny should drop pretty quickly. For me, I realised almost immediately what had happened and what I'd done, or at least my mind found the right path to wander down in trying to find that answer. These bees were starving. Adding the supers back with lots of wet honey dripping from the frames is a quick fix, but not really quick enough in this instance. The bees were so close to starving that they could hardly move. The solution was to find food fast for them. I opened another couple of colonies and found that these had plenty of food in their brood frames, and it was fresh liquid honey, just what I needed. In desperate times, you need to take action fast, and the very best way to get food into these bees quickly, in bulk, was to scrape open a couple of frames and literally drip honey all over the bees. and on the top bars of the frames. We had thousands of bees piled high and dying from starvation, and I needed to get food to each of them quickly. Now, having almost drowned the bees in honey, the sudden change was almost miraculous. Within literally a period of no more than 60 seconds, the honeybees came back to life and were moving around as if nothing had happened. It really was like somebody had flicked a switch and brought them back to normal speed from some kind of slow motion animation. Honestly, I think had I not been there at that time and left it even an hour longer, the colony would have died. So if you find yourself getting excited about taking off your spring crop of honey, just check the brood box to make sure they have enough food to last the intervening period between inspections. In other news from this busy week, we've had some degree of success with our early queen cell production. Remember that colony that swarmed way back in mid-April? Well, I took several queen cells from them, and actually, for the most part, we've not looked at them since. That was until this week, when I figured it was time to see if we had mated queens and an opportunity to move them into a bigger box from the nuke boxes that we'd placed them in. Well, it's not all good news, unfortunately, and one of the reasons I don't get stuck into what I would call proper queen rearing until, well, around now. We had something like 8 to 10 nuke boxes with queen cells in, and having checked them this week, we found 2 that were drone-laying queens and 1 that has become an egg-laying worker colony. It's a little disappointing, given the fantastic weather they've had for the period when the queens should have emerged and then got out and mated, but it's how things work out sometimes. It's also worth noting that should you want to produce a new queen or 2, it's best to set up a few more in case not all of them make it through to a successful brood pattern. I'm going to shoot a video showing the drone-laying queens and especially the egg-laying worker colonies this week, just to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. I think it's fascinating that the workers, finding themselves without a queen or any way to produce a queen, can somehow switch on their ovaries to produce eggs and start laying. The situation is all the more incredible if you pause to think through what's happening and why. So our workers haven't mated and cannot mate. There's no chance that these eggs being laid by the workers can actually amount to anything really, and honestly, I've never allowed the colony that has become an egg-laying worker colony any amount of time to see what might happen. The difference between the egg-laying worker colony and the drone-laying queen colony are quite obvious once you know what you're looking at. Again, I'll take some pictures to show you all the difference. A drone-laying queen will continue to lay eggs, usually 1 per cell, but is, for some reason, unable to fertilise those eggs and produce workers. The unfertilised eggs go on to become drones, hence drone-laying queen. The colony is doomed unless you can act early enough to replace the queen. The brood frames fill up with uneven drone larvae in worker cells, and it just becomes a tangled mangle of cells that you really need to cut out and start over with. If you catch it early enough though, and you have plenty of workers, you could remove the old queen and replace her with a new one, or unite them with another queen-right colony using the newspaper method. The egg-laying worker colony doesn't have a queen, and workers, switching on their egg-laying ability, compete with each other to be the one laying the eggs. As a result, you'll find quite a number of eggs in one cell. Not just a couple, but lots and lots of them. Sometimes so many eggs that you can't see the base of the cell because it's covered with so many eggs. I don't think I've ever allowed a colony like this to continue past that egg-laying stage. What I mean is I don't think I've ever allowed them or had enough time to see if they're able to produce any viable drones from the eggs that they lay. It seems improbable that any would actually make it through to the larval stage, let alone through to maturity, with all those workers fighting to lay eggs, it probably leaves no other workers to feed and take care of any of those larvae should they develop. There's also the thought that eggs laid by workers other than their own might be destroyed and removed to try to up their chances of producing some viable drones, and drones are what they would become as unfertilised eggs. Could this be a last gasp chance for the colony to pass on some genetic material in the hope that they at least produce a drone or two that could get out to mate with a virgin queen and thus pass on some of the colony's traits? I should probably find time to answer that question myself, maybe back to the books and the scientific papers, if I get a chance. Elsewhere in the apiaries, we've had quite a number of split colonies that have now seen the addition of a new queen. This week we received a batch of queens from Luke and Susie at Northumberland Honey, and I spent an afternoon visiting apiary sites to add them. We'll pop back in to see that these have been released okay in a few days. It's an easy enough process introducing a new queen. Remove the tab at the bottom of the queen cage and suspend it between two frames. Job done. But for me, the preparation is the key. I like my queenless splits to be hopelessly queenless, which means being without any eggs or young larvae that they could produce a new queen from themselves, and then killing that expensive replacement queen that I've just purchased and introduced. We make all of our splits in the spring now, ever since that disaster autumn where wasps attacked and killed so many of our late nukes that we created. It gives the new colonies a chance to build up through the warmer months of summer and grow to a large enough size to be able to overwinter through an average cold spell without too much concern. There's me talking about winter already, and we're not yet in June. Well, at least not quite. Well, that's it for this week. For all of you who haven't yet signed up to my Patreon page, I, together with Steph, have been creating beekeeping content for many years now. And if you're looking for some straightforward, down-to-earth tips and techniques, help and advice, then do take a look at my Patreon page. We have over 1,600 individual beekeeping posts, videos and podcasts filled with useful and timely help and advice. My approach is pragmatic and calm, sometimes entertaining, but always with help and support for beekeepers at the heart of what I do. I keep my videos short and concise wherever possible. No waffle, no flannel, just honest beekeeping advice from years of keeping bees. Take a look and join me for the new 2025 beekeeping season. It'll cost you less than a jar of honey, and you never know, there may be something there that will help you improve your beekeeping. Head over to Google and search for Patreon and the Norfolk Honey Company.